This time of returning home, I witnesses the great changes. The surroundings of my home were decayed and chaotic due to demolition. Turning around the third crossing, I saw that the neighbor who shared a western wall with my house had moved, leaving only the historical traces of bricks and wood pieces at the western wall of my home. Those traces were way too old, but it became a strong modern style of the composition. Great-grandmother's attic was isolated on one side and looked desolate and helpless, which reminded me of a wooden coffin suspended on a cliff. In the evening, great-grandmother came down for dinner with the nannies and company. I went up and shouted, "Great-grandma!" Great-grandmother stared at me far and mysteriously for a long time and then said, "I heard your steps in the afternoon." I asked my wife to greet great-grandmother, but my wife stood nervously and even say dreadfully in front of my great-grandmother. I couldn't figure out how my son should call my great-grandmother for that moment, so I had to shout, "Old Ancestor," for my non-speaking son.
Great-grandmother stood for a long time in front of my son. Two hands trembled and touched in his private. Later, great-grandmother smiled. When she smiled, her face cracked irregular gaps like a dry land. I knew that great-grandmother must have touched his little thing. Great-grandmother withdrew her hand, dipped some spit on her fingers, and pressed it between my son's eyebrows. My son suddenly cried aloud, and my great-grandmother shouted to my son strangely, "Old ancestor!" I thought that was a mistake, but I couldn't decipher the universe's mystery here.
Great-grandmother said, "They're gone eventually." I knew she was talking about the old neighbor next door. My great-grandfather told me that we've been neighbors for a time. Great-grandmother said. When great-grandmother spoke, her intact teeth glowed like ancient fossils. When the house was built, Emperor Chongzhen had not ascended the throne yet. When great-grandmother finished speaking, she then sighed for a long time, without saying a word at the entire night. Her long sigh traversed the silence of great-grandmother in my ears, like comet aura, wildered and fell back to the ancient Ming dynasty. I saw my home fluctuate in the fluid of time, and the shore beaten by the arc waves had always been the teeth of my great-grandmother. This is really incredible. Sending my great-grandmother away, my father said to me, "You guys fatigued all the way down here, so sleep early. Anything comes tomorrow. You guys just sleep in me and your mother's bed." Saying so, father opened the wood door of the east cell. I remember that great-grandmother's coffin had been placed there, and my father applied a layer of paint every year. It's red and black. The coffin has been quietly revolving around the sun with the earth for decades. The coffin had great-grandmother in the attic blame each other, look forward to each other, and hope to give each other meaning, ending, and eternal sinking mind. "Where do you sleep?" I asked my father. "Your great-grandmother's coffin," my father said. My wife looked at me nervously, very unreliable and hesitant. My father closed the door quietly, and then the east cell was as dark as an enlarged pupil. As soon as going to bed, my wife said, "Why sleeping in the coffin?" I said, "It's not a big deal. We're a family, and we'll be together no matter living or death." My wife said, "No matter how, living people can live with dead ones." I comforted my wife and said, "This is my family's style. Sleeping in a coffin is also a common thing. Sometimes we struggle to sleep there. In the past years, my elder brother and sister died. My great-grandmother did not allow burying them outside, so just let my father bury them under the bed." My wife suddenly sat up. "Where?" "Just under the bed." I pounded the bedboard with my foot, and it reflected hollow echoes just below the board. My wife's eyes oozed green lights. She grabbed my forearm and said, What's wrong with your family? There's nothing wrong with families, I said. Every family is the same. My wife hugged my waist tight. I'm scared, my wife said. I'm so scared.